Hi there. The Emmy Awards were last weekend, and I want to give a quick rundown on how House of the Dragon performed at them. Now, we knew going in we weren't nominated for any major things because so many other big shows were ending, so this is just a after-action report. This isn't a big thing, but just state of the industry and everything. But before I dive into that, there was a very weird moment at the Emmys live event itself involving Game of Thrones that Winter is Coming to Net already had a video about this, which I think can objectively handle it better than I can, so I'll link you to that at the end. It's not just me saying this was weird. That they announced in advance there would be this Game of Thrones cast reunion, and we went, what? Who's coming? Then we actually saw the show, the way that they did it was they'd have cast reunions during every other awards presentation. So you'd have like the old cast from 30 years ago on Cheers would come and be there. And it was decent, it made sense. The very last award of the night for Best Drama, they had a replica Iron Throne, they had the host come out in a medieval costume. But when it came to actually see cast members, just Peter Dinklage came, walked up, and presented the award. There was no reunion, which led to a lot of questions we don't have answers for of, was this planned as a reunion and no one was willing to come except for Peter Dinklage? Out of they're angry at the legacy of Game of Thrones? I don't know. It's easy to read into it that way. There's many ways we could read it, that maybe they just knew they couldn't get all of them and no one dropped out, but they just lumped it in with calling it a reunion when they shouldn't have in the first place, that there was literally one person. What? But no, that leads me to think that at least one person dropped out. Even two people is technically a reunion of sorts. Oh, the other weird thing is the speech that Dinklage gave presenting it, he actually gave the King Bran stories or speech from the much reviled who has a better story than Bran Stark speech, which is nonsense, but at least kind of made, as Winter is Coming to Net said, sort of made sense if you're praising, people who make drama shows, storytellers, even if it made no sense in the actual show. They still shouldn't have done it given how reviled it was, but ignoring that. You think that they want to get, like, Tier A cast members, or even major cast members from before. Now, Tier A are the core seven of Dinklage, Harrington Clark, Nikolai Coster-Waldau, Lena Headey, Maisie Williams, Sophie Turner. And I don't, like, there's other people, obviously, like Hannah Waddingham was in the show. They wouldn't have a reunion with her and Tyrion. They were never a thing. Like major cast members that they compared to the other shows that had reunions. Some people legitimately had busy schedules. I mean, like, Sophie Turner is in the middle of a divorce and awful custody battle. I would not have expected Sophie Turner to be at this in any circumstance. It's, why did you announce this as a reunion? Did someone refuse to dignify coming to this because they're really mad at Game of Thrones behind the scenes? I have no idea. Just look at Winter is Coming.net's thing. Keep this in mind. We shouldn't read too much into it, but if, as we hope, years from now, cast members have their Ray Fisher moment and openly turn on the showrunners and berate I had a miserable experience on this show, they might years from now, refer back to this as, oh yeah, I refused to come to the Emmys for a reunion. So keep this in the back of your mind if we later find out what the heck happened behind the scenes. Right now, no one, including me, has any answers for there was a reunion, you said there'd be there, and then there wasn't. I don't know. Moving on. How did we do at the actual Emmy Awards? Well, we knew so many other big shows were ending. Succession swept the awards. All the major ones, and the minor ones were swept by The Last of Us. So we had 9 nominations overall, 1 for Best Drama, the rest for technical awards. I invested in the Creative Arts Emmys, because, like, costumes, prosthetic makeup, set design they're not as overhyped, therefore they seem to be a little more honest. So you follow me on that, but we only won for House of the Dragon in one category. Outstanding Costumes for a Fantasy or Sci-Fi Series. For Janie Tamim. She also won for the Costume Design Guild Awards earlier this year. But we knew this was an off year, that we did better at the Golden Globes. We managed to get the Golden Globe drama win because Succession wasn't out that year, because the Golden Globes go by calendar year, January 1st to January 1st. The Emmys go from May to May, so the cutoff was different. Of course, because the cutoff was different, that meant we ended up with Emma Darcy competing head-to-head with Zendaya for Best Actress, and it lost. So, but on the other hand, we didn't have to compete with Succession, so we got split vote or whatever, got Best Drama. But consider that this is the end of an era. That just looking at the Best Drama nominees this year, it's the final season of Succession, the final season of The Crown, final season of Better Call Saul. I was surprised in a different video, I went over this already, when I ran down the list of, since Game of Thrones ended, what has been dominating the Emmys based on what is getting the most nominations, not wins, in the major categories. That is, Best Drama, Writing, Directing, and all the acting categories. Half a dozen shows got over half of all nominations, and dominated it since then. That the Emmys don't just flow gradually. There's different eras where one big show tends to dominate. The 2000s, it was The Sopranos. 2010s, it was Breaking Bad and Mad Men era. This post-Game of Thrones era was the Succession, Crown, Better Call Saul era. Well, Better Call Saul kept getting snubbed, but at least got nominations. And the fourth big one, the other big awards show for Netflix, was Ozark. That ended over a year ago. The only other things that are kind of around, that Handmaid's Tale has one more season. That's kind of this is bottom of the list. Handmaid's Tale and The Morning Show at Apple, where they consistently get some acting nominations, but they're not sweeping the awards. Still looking at the top four here. All of those three were having their final season at this Emmys, and looking at it, you realized watching it live, tell me if you watched it live, this is the end of an era. Will the new coming era be House of the Dragon's time to reclaim its status as a big top contender at these things? Remember, this used to be a dead franchise, and it was surprising that it got decent awards recognition at the Golden Globes. So just quickly running through all this, because I know it's not that big of a thing, but how did we do by category, and what is the competition looking forward? Best Drama lost to Succession, zero surprise. The only thing we won, Fantasy or Sci-Fi Costumes by Janine Tabeem, but she's leaving after Season 1. Season 2, we're going to get a new costume designer, though I look forward to it, Carolyn McCall, who is costume designer on Downton Abbey. So we'll see how we do with that. Now, in terms of the awards, this is Fantasy Sci-Fi Costumes. In this case, they split a category for Sci-Fi Fantasy. Other times, they lumped it in with period shows. They've since split that. There were times in the past where period and fantasy were in the same category. But even today, there's some categories that don't distinguish between drama and comedy, as you will see. But in terms of who's the competition anymore, for costumes, House of the Dragon beat Star Wars Mandalorian, Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Lord of the Rings of Power. None of these other awards we won. I'm just saying who beat us, who are the other nominees. The only other one I was really looking forward to was cinematography for a 1-hour series. That seemed like the most prestigious thing short of director. It was for Catherine Goldschmidt for Episode 8, Lord of the Tides. Great episode. She lost to Marvelous Miss Maisel. Like I said, some categories don't even distinguish between comedy and drama. The weird thing is, Best Director does have separate categories for Best Director Drama and Best Director Comedy. This one doesn't. Though in this case, this was also the final season for Marvelous Miss Maisel, so maybe the room will be cleared for next year, I don't know. Other nominees this year included The Crown, also ending, Wednesday, which is a comedy, and Star Wars Andor. That's another big one. Moving on, non-prosthetic makeup. House of the Dragon's Amanda Knight lost to The Marvelous Miss Maisel. And you think it's interesting, when I'm looking behind the scenes things, I know nothing about this, that a real science goes into how they brighten a character's skin to match their mood for the cinematography in a scene. Like an extension of how you don't think of the lighting director as a thing because it's a subtle effect that just affects the color grading of a scene that just. Oh, just seeing her explain in a behind the scenes thing, Rainier is supposed to be vulnerable in this scene, so this is how I'm using this makeup. And it's like, this doesn't occur to me because it's a subconscious thing. So again, Marvelous Miss Maisel. Then for prosthetic makeup, House of the Dragons nominees were the husband and wife team of Barry and Sarah Gower, who are veterans from Game of Thrones. Remember them in that Last Watch documentary? Barry and Sarah Gower lost, however, to Barry and Sarah Gower for their work on The Last of Us. They worked on more than one show this year, so they had multiple nominations in the same category, the Gowers. One for House of the Dragon and one for The Last of Us. And, they're not doing, like, zombie stuff for us anymore for the White Walkers. That they did, like, Viserys' disease and burn wounds. A lot of that type of thing in the battle scenes is what they do. Prosthetic makeup. But they did, The Infected for The Last of Us. Of course they deserve to win for that. What other shows competed in this category? Cabinet of Curiosities, Lord of the Rings of Power, which actually had great prosthetics because they went back from CGI orcs to prosthetic orcs. That undeniably was one thing they got right. Also, Star Trek Picard, though not a Star Wars project. Star Trek, the one thing they really got in was for this. And, like when you see the behind-the-scenes things on, like, they're applying the Klingon makeup to the war factor and going, like, look at how much more advanced it is. We shifted from, like, silicone to this other zinc thing. It's so much easier to apply. The science of how do you make prosthetics as a material science. Good for them. Weird thing is, Star Wars has been known to be dominated for this. Like, Mandalorian Season 2 won Best Prosthetic Makeup 2 years ago. Wasn't even nominated this year, but Star Trek Picard was. Whatever, but Barry and Sarah Gower are great, and they work on a lot of different things. They also made Vecna for Stranger Things Season 4. And will they be competing against themselves again for, like, Stranger Things Season 5 against House of the Dragon Season 2? I don't know. We do know that The Last of Us, which cleared up on a lot of these this year, The Last of Us Season 2 will come out in the next Emmy cycle after House of the Dragon Season 2. They will not be competing head-to-head again next time, which is good because they beat us in a lot of things, deservedly so. Moving down the list, we have production design for period or fantasy 1 hour, in which House of the Dragon's Jim Clay, who he worked on The Orient Express, he worked on Children of Men, he's a great guy. The set design and set construction and building the architecture and everything, production design. Jim Clay lost to Guillermo del Toro for his anthology TV series Cabinet of Curiosities. How can we compete with Del Toro? I mean, not that I'm complaining, there's no shame in this loss. It's the Guillermo del Toro made this fantasy anthology series. The good news for us going forward is it doesn't look like his show got renewed for a second season, that there's no way we can compete against that. Then you have special effects. Special effects is split into 2 categories, actually. Basically long form and short form, much like the Hugos, where you can have either a full TV season or one specific episode. House of the Dragon was nominated for the full season, which is why it's special effects full hour TV season. We lost special effects to The Last of Us. Again, they're really clearing up, but we won't be competing against them next year. But who are the other nominees? Star Wars had Mandalorian and Andor, and also Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. That's pretty much who's competitive for special effects this year. And, it's weird that House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones, was one of those rare shows that covers both ends of the spectrum from what they call high to low culture. Like, you've got prestige dramas like Succession and The Crown, and then you got popular shows like Star Wars stuff. Rarely do you get a show that gets nominated in both. Like, rarely, like Andor Season 1 was actually getting nominated for a few acting things that other shows didn't get in, though. That is rare, or like The Last of Us is one of the rare things that get nominated at both ends of the spectrum. That's kind of who we're competing against. Next one, look, even I am not nerdy enough to really follow sound editing, best sound editing, 1 hour comedy or drama, but we also lost that to, guess what, The Last of Us. So it's good that we're not going against them head to head for season 2. But again, I did not expect House of the Dragon to do well this year. I knew all these big shows are having their blockbuster final season. It'll come next year, season 2. And when I say next year, obviously these are the awards that will be held in fall of 2025. September 2025 awards, because they go from May of this year to May of next year. Actually, so there was one ninth award that we were nominated in. This is unusual. Short form nonfiction reality. Basically for all the behind the scenes documentaries. And the only nominees this year we lost to Succession. The only nominees out of 5 nominees, 4 of them were the different inside the episode things for HBO shows. For House of the Dragon inside the episode, The Last of Us, White Lotus, and Succession. And the 5th one was for an SNL behind-the-scenes thing. Why is this weird? Well, they've had inside the episodes since, like, the beginning of Game of Thrones. They had them for other HBO projects in the 2010s. This is the first year that HBO is pushing for the inside the episodes to be nominated in this category. I mean, Succession, this is their final season. Seasons 1 through 3 of Succession before this, none of their inside the episodes are even nominated. Was there a change in the behind-the-scenes rules? I don't know. Just looking through the list, short-form nonfiction reality was usually behind-the-scenes documentaries on, like, the making of SNL or the making of The Daily Show. Behind-the-scenes shows like that. Why weren't they nominating the inside the episodes before? I don't know. Of course, think of how far we've come, that Game of Thrones inside the episodes used to be an embarrassment where Benioff and Weiss made fools of themselves, whereas this year the real set of good writers and showrunners had insightful things to say about everything, particularly that standalone expansion of it, the house the dragons built, where they're just going over, and this is how he built everything, but even the inside the episodes where it's Ryan Condal explaining, this is a story change decision I made, this is why I interpret it that way. He gave good answers to everything. So it's just weird that why wasn't even, like, Succession being nominated for this before? I don't know. But in terms of what we're looking at as our competition going ahead, these are all technical categories. I'm not going to get bogged down in it. And we're not going to be against The Last of Us Season 2. I made a whole video a long time ago, about a year ago, about what is the next generation of Emmy competition now that these big shows are ending. And I tried to map out which ones will be competing against us head-to-head. All of which is now useless because of the writer's strike delaying everything. So I'm just going to breeze through this really fast. That I said, based on their success in the last Emmy cycle, the new up-and-coming Emmy-level prestige dramas competing in the major awards, Best Drama, Best Acting categories, Directing, Writing, are The Last of Us, The White Lotus, Euphoria, if it keeps going, Squid Game, Severance is a big one, and maybe Yellow Jackets in the female acting categories. I'm talking about what's the next big flagship show that's also running 4 to 5 years, roughly the same time period, not like a one-shot. And on top of that, something I took out of the list was Star Wars Andor, because they were supposed to run 5 seasons on that, and they said it would be too demanding, we're just going to condense it all into Andor Season 2 will be their final season. So on the one hand, I don't put it in that list, but on the other hand, while we will not be competing against The Last of Us for Season 2, House of the Dragon Season 2 will be competing against Andor Season 2 in the same Emmy cycle. Because if House of the Dragon comes out this summer, Andor Season 2 comes out next spring of 2025, and the cutoff is May, they will be going head-to-head at the Emmys, and unlike, say, Succession, Andor, like The Last of Us, is one of those things that competes against us in every category, even the creative arts ones like costumes, special effects. So, if I'm to leave you with one big prediction, it's that with all of these other shows, we don't even know if Squid Game season 2 will be good because it was kind of a hit or miss. Severance season 2, can they keep that up? I don't know if the others, there might be a few head-to-heads here where Euphoria only gets nominated for Best Actress, but Zendaya routinely wins it. So we're going to Emma Darcy lost to Zendaya at the Golden Globes. That might happen again at the next Emmys, but in terms of the next head-to-head major rival, who knows if the next White Lotus will be good. It'll probably be heavy competition in the acting categories, maybe not like cinematography. But in terms of something trying to check every box, and if it's as good as season 1, Severance season 2 are the major competition we're looking at going ahead. But just the bigger thing is other channels will be covering this of, wow, this was the end of an era and beginning of another one. Succession, The Crown, and Better Call Saul all ended in the same year. Can House of the Dragon retake the crown?